This is insane to me. The government openly at this point recognizes that they did the wrong thing, and they just simply lie over and over again. Like, I don't know what to do in this situation. This is just unprecedented territory. We're gonna do the oval. We're gonna do the oval back and forth, all up and down, because there's a lot to talk about here with the Bukele meeting, where Donald Trump went nutty mode with President Bukele of El Salvador. As you guys know, Nayib Bukele is probably the worst Palestinian descent person out there. Like, literally one of the worst, if not the worst. I would say it's like him and son of Hamas, like honorary, no longer Palestinians. Like, people get mad at like DJ Khaled for not really saying anything about Palestine or doing much about Palestine, but like, this guy straight up is the worst. Like, it's him, Richard Hanania, but he is the worst, I think. As far as like Nayib Bukele goes, he started off relatively progressive, focusing on like rehabilitation over incarceration, and then very quickly became like a cryptocurrency guy who was willing to use El Salvador as a light for Western interests, billionaires, things like that. He is a horrible, monstrous piece of shit. He set up the CECOT facility for anti-terrorism. And since then, there's speculation that he also worked with some of the MS-13 leadership and simultaneously decided to go on this like massive surveillance regime, massive police state regime, where his goons will go up to any street vendor or any village in the middle of the night and just black bag people and do dragnets and then claim that they're all MS-13. And then, 300 people at a time will go and sit in front of a judge who's wearing a balaclava and decide that they're all MS-13, all 300 of them. And then they get disappeared into CECOT, where they're tortured. No due process, no care or consideration for human rights. It's truly terrifying. No, it's not like America. It's beyond America, okay? It's a little bit worse. Our American prison system is pretty bad, but at least the things that happen in the buildup to the American prison system there's some semblance of logic and some semblance of order. Yeah, they arrested like 2% of the population. Is beyond USA. Salvi here. I still can't believe how brainwashed he's got former FMLN members to vote for him. I have friends whose parents flew home to vote for him. Yeah, a lot of the Salvadorans, they like him. In Latin America, I feel like there's a which way Western man moment, and all the reactionary right wingers, they like Bukele, and all of the leftist, socialist adjacent the Latin American countries are not too fond of him. FMLN is the leftist party of El Salvador. I know, but I'm saying that like he has been able to win a lot of favor amongst all Salvadorans. They're not even deporting. They're sending people to concentration camps. These people can't even just go live in another country. Yeah, that's the other side of this. It is pretty terrifying. And yeah, I mean, that's the brief little background on Nayib Bukele, right? That's the brief background on Nayib Bukele. Very far right, very reactionary. Interestingly enough, Donald Trump used to on Bukele a lot and would claim that like Nayib Bukele was also dumping his asylum, dumping his own MS-13 gang members directly into the United States of America. But I guess they've patched that up. They've patched their relationship seemingly, as he is using the CECOT facility as a slave labor concentration camp that we have outsourced to El Salvador. Truly horrifying stuff that's taking place here. Yeah, this is the especially horrifying part of this. Before the pool entered, this exchange was captured on the El Salvador government's live stream. Trump endorses sending homegrown U.S. prisoners to El Salvador, meaning American citizens to notorious foreign prisons.
People wanted to change their weapons, and they wanted to. He demanded, they love you, they love what you do. I'm not for support. I want him to do, for homegrown criminals next. Yeah. I said, homegrown's are next. The homegrown's built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, we've got space. All right.
He says the homegrown ones are next. You guys built about 5 more spaces. He goes, yeah, we got space. It's not a Twitter video issue. This is not supposed to be live, chat. This is a hot mic. This is a hot mic, okay? This is not, we were not supposed to hear this. Before, as Jonathan Lemire, co-host of the Morning Show, says, this is before the pool entered. This exchange was captured on the El Salvador government's live stream. Trump endorses sending homegrown U.S. prisoners to El Salvador, meaning the American citizens to notorious foreign prisons. And it's not even just a hot mic. I believe this is something that the Trump administration has talked about already. It's something that Bukele has talked about already. So that's it. To be fair, he said it before. He said it shortly thereafter in the press pool too. Yeah. It's not something that they're hiding. Here's a question. Are you deporting American? Are you considered deporting American citizens to El Salvador? Trump says, yeah, that includes them. You think they're a special type of people or something?
Open to deporting individuals that aren't foreign aliens but are criminals to El Salvador. Does that include potentially U.S.
People on Twitter are already defending it. We're so cooked. Yeah. I mean, they're Nazis. There's not really anything else I can say about that. That's it. It's here. It's happening. They're fascists. They're really horny for this kind of violence. They don't really consider that this kind of violence may actually impact them in the long run. I don't know. This is every single day that goes by. Like, I joke about it being Burger Reich or whatever, but like, it's not really a joke. These guys are actually straightforward, blood-curdling fascists. They are baying for blood. They want it. They're excited at the prospect for this kind of structure to become legally calcified. They want to test the boundaries. They're testing the boundaries right now in terms of like what they can get away with. They've already eradicated any sort of mechanism of pushback. There's not a lot of work you can get. One of the most important and yet like somewhat quiet actions that the Trump administration took was against law firms. Okay. And we obviously covered it here, but there wasn't like that much anger or resentment towards this, partially because it's like there's outrage fatigue. It's impossible to pay attention to all the things that they're doing. But the reason why it was very significant, the reason why Donald Trump's attacks against law firms was very significant is because they basically came in and said, if you don't do pro bono work for us, we won't let you into federal buildings. And if you can't go into a federal building, you can't practice law. Like, you can't talk to your clients. Like, they basically said, you have to, you can't go against us. There are very few law firms that are still capable or interested in fighting back against them, against this government. Please stop. I don't care about the CECOT facility thing right now, okay? I know. This is like,
I just saw this video.
Are these bodies and blood? I know. It's just the CECOT facility. Does it have bodies and blood? Is that what it is? Once again, eyes on the prize here. You guys always hyper-focus. Liberals have this fundamental inability to understand larger schemes that are happening in broad daylight, where they have to focus on like some kind of conspiratorial aspect to all of this. Okay? Please stop. Lock in. I don't even know if that is real. I don't even know if they're just like fucking killing people, assassinating them, and just like dumping them into a mass grave in the way that people are talking about. But I do know that they are doing horrifying torture. We know that already. We've seen it. It's not like they're hiding that part of it. Bro, pay attention on taxes on USA law firms. Regular fold. Folk don't know the importance. But why send criminals to another country? I thought our prisons were for profit and want as many as possible. I think that the CECOT alignment is going to work where Eric Prince, from what I've read, Eric Prince Academy, right? Like private mercenaries are going to take over some of the logistics from the Department of Homeland Security. That's number one. Number two, they're most likely going to do a joint partnership with American corporations, I suspect, like American private prison corporations, where they can open up these facilities or manage these facilities, these concentration camps, for pennies on the dollar, as opposed to having them operate on U.S. soil, where there are at least some kind of constitutional hurdles that they have to avoid. So I suspect that they will utilize the They'll utilize El Salvador, purchase the land, engage in a land lease agreement with the Salvadoran government, and it will still be like, American private prison corporations will make money off of this, I suspect. By sending them to another country, it becomes foreign policy too. That's what Trump has started saying. Yeah, there's a bunch of reasons as to why sending them to El Salvador is a benefit for a fascist administration like this, and we're seeing it. One of the benefits from their perspective is, well, we can't return them, even when the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, says you have to return this person. You were not supposed to send this person. This person is a active withdrawal, as in due process kicked in. He went through the court system. The American government literally cleared this Maryland resident cleared a higher standard of proof to get a withdrawal to El Salvador, as in the asylum application beyond that is easier to prove. It is harder to prove a withdrawal to El Salvador than it is to get an asylum application through. Okay? That's precisely the reason why the Supreme Court gave a unanimous decision on the facilitation of the return of this, or withdrawal, withholding, sorry. Thank you, Jay Mershon. There are different mechanisms to defend yourself against, like, deportation. A withholding of removal to El Salvador, which is where he's from, is a de facto harder to prove in courts than getting an asylum application done. And it means de facto that, like, you're not supposed to remove this person. You're not supposed to deport this person. Or even if this person was to, I don't know, do something heinous, right? Like a deportable crime, they would not be able to deport him to El Salvador. They would deport him somewhere else. But this person never did that, for the record. He's not a part of any gang. He has, as far as I understand, there's no crime that he's committed. And yet the actual crime that was committed in this process was done by the government, which then admitted to the wrongdoing. Anyway, let's continue with this, and then we'll do...
Citizens fully naturalized American.
If they're criminals and if they hit people with baseball bats over their head that happen to be 90 years old, and if they 87-year-old women in Coney Island, Brooklyn, yeah, that includes them. What do you think? There's special category of person? They're as bad as anybody that comes in.
With a simple administrative error, the U.S. now has wholesale SCOTUS approval to illegally detain and deport any U.S. citizen that they want. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go that far. But yeah, Donald Trump is now entertaining the notion of kidnapping, blackbagging, and shipping off American natural-born U.S. citizens to a different country. This is new. This is new territory. A lot of the stuff that they're doing is new territory, for the record. Straw man argument too strong. It's not even a straw man. There is no straw man that he's engaging in. He just, like, made up a couple cases that are gruesome in his mind and said, yeah, we're going to ship those guys off to El Salvador. Okay, we're going to ship those guys off to the El Salvador torture slave facility. Aren't people just going to revolt if this admin goes full fascist like this? I don't know. I don't think so. Especially on this stuff. On the deportation stuff, I think a lot of people are utterly oblivious. They are utterly oblivious to the actions that this administration is taking. And I think on the Israel stuff, on the deportation stuff, which goes hand in hand, it is far more consequential than the trade wars, okay? And this isn't to say that, like, the tariffs and the exemptions are not consequential. It's far more consequential than the Doge cuts, which isn't to say that those Doge cuts aren't consequential. But this, ironically enough, this thing that not enough people are paying attention to is far more significant for our future. Because the reality of the matter is, you do the Doge cuts, people revolt, okay? People rise up. Let's say they fire every federal employee, right? And then the people go, what are you doing? You just fired every single person. How dare you? You start protesting in the street. His administration comes in and black bags key leadership in those protests, and they ship them off to El Salvador. Boom. All of a sudden, there's nothing. You can't do anything. There's no free speech anymore at this point. There's no due process anymore at this point. And when you get deported to the CECOT facility, you have no way of return. So it doesn't even matter. It is one of due process and First Amendment rights are the most consequential remaining the most consequential remaining protections that we have that they are actively destroying. And ironically, the sad state of affairs is that many of these people are either completely oblivious to this stuff. I've been ringing the alarm bells on this for quite a while now. And I think that most Americans are completely either A, oblivious to this, or B, perhaps even worse than being oblivious, the ones who are knowledgeable about what's going on here are in support of it. They are championing it. It's a truly terrifying predicament.
If the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Please go ahead.
President Trump, thank you so much. How many illegal criminals are you planning?
Yeah. You said this. You said that if SCOTUS says someone needed to be returned, you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. Why don't you say, isn't it wonderful we're keeping criminals out of the country? Like, that's his reaction to this is, you are in violation of the Supreme Court orders. Here, we'll just watch the full thing. But basically, the question is, Mr. President, you are directly in violation of the Supreme Court orders. What do you have to say about this? And his response is, it's great. It's great that we're keeping terrorists out of this country. By the way, for the record, there is no evidence whatsoever. There's only evidence to the contrary, okay, of this wrongly deported U.S. man, this Maryland resident, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. There is no evidence whatsoever that he's in MS-13. There's only evidence to suggest that he is directly in the crosshairs of MS-13, and yet, and this is something that the federal government has also personally acknowledged, and yet they still, on the one hand, say he's MS-13, and then also on the other hand, say there's no way we can bring him back.
With you because you want to stop crime, and so do we. And it's very, very effective. And I want to just say hello to the people of El Salvador and say they have one hell of a president. Okay, and I mean that, and I know him well. I know him as a very young man, Marco. Even younger than you. You know, he started pretty young.
He'll always be younger.
Young at heart. But I want to thank you for the great job you're doing. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to be here in the Oval Office with the President and leader of the free world. We're very happy, and we're very eager to help. We know that you have a crime problem, a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we can do it. And we actually turned the murder capital of the world, that was the journalists call it, right? Murder capital of the world into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. And, you know, sometimes they say that we imprison thousands. I like to say that we actually liberated millions. So, you know, like,
it's very good. Who gave him that line? Do you think I can use that?
Yes. And in fact, Mr. President, you have 350 million people to liberate. Yes. But to liberate 350 million people, you have to imprison some. You know, that's the way it works, right? You cannot just, you know, free the criminals and think crime is going to go down magically. You have to imprison them so you can liberate 350 million Americans that are asking for the end of crime and the end of terrorism. And it can be done. I mean, you're doing it already. And I'm sure that people have seen the change.
Why is he sucking Trump/America's boot? What do you mean? This is the dream for him. Everybody knows that if you want to have a permanent dictatorship till the end of time, especially in a Latin American country, you have to be America's dog. That's how you get all the benefits. You get money, you get political support. That's it. These are all of his wishes being realized in broad daylight in real time. Bukele has been able to generate a lot of goodwill, partially as a consequence of how violent MS-13 was, and how much people were, you know, how much people just could not deal with the impact of MS-13's violence, and basically turned his police apparatus into a gang that is even more powerful than MS-13, partially while collaborating with MS-13, potentially collaborating with MS-13 as well. This is the suspicion that people have.
In the streets, a long way to go because you're just initiating your second term, but it's clear that, you know, with the numbers.
What is this? Oh my God, you guys Bukele way too much. Yeah, he's authoritarian, but you guys don't on Xi Jinping like this, brother. What the are you talking about? What kind of industrial policy has Nayib Bukele implemented in El Salvador? Like, what do you mean? He's just like a straightforward right-wing dip fascist. Like, that's it. His claim to fame here is basically building slave labor prisons and holding people unjustifiably in said slave labor prisons, like no due process whatsoever. Virtually every single humanitarian organization has been writing extensively about the CECOT facility and how horrifying it is. I think the horrifying aspect of CECOT in and of itself is obvious to everyone, right? You either get put into the slammer where you have no daylight, you don't see any light whatsoever, you're in pitch black darkness, isolated from everybody else, or when you're not, when you're in general population, you're under constant surveillance and constant light where you can't even sleep, okay? Sleep deprivation is the norm in these facilities. But outside of that, you have very little opportunity to speak with the outside world, very little opportunity to speak with your lawyers, and no way to combat an unjustifiable imprisonment. You don't have to sympathize with MS-13 in this process. You have to recognize that, one, these are torture facilities, okay? And two, more importantly than the fact that these are torture facilities, the people that are being put into these torture facilities, it's because Hasan can't relate. He never went when crime was rampant. Yeah. He got rid of crime. I don't know. You think you understand how bad it was? Chatters, please, for the love of Christ and all things holy, listen to my words, okay? I'm explaining why people still believe in Bukele. And I'm also telling you how stupid it is to make the assumption that crime is gone now. It's done in El Salvador. It doesn't exist. When you got the government doing the crime, what will it take for one of your family members to get black bagged and falsely considered to be MS-13 for you to go, okay, maybe this wasn't the best idea? He imprisoned 2% of the population, dude. What are we talking about? There's already plenty of evidence to show that his police force goes in. Yeah, that's why I said my family's from El Salvador. Yes, dumb. That's why I said, what will it take when one of your family members gets black bagged and sent to CECOT and you know that they're not a part of MS-13? Well, is that when you will comprehend what is happening? I'm not saying the situation was better in the past. I'm not saying that at all. I'm simply stating that the heavy-handed nature of these apprehensions and the lack of due process and the torturous conditions within the facilities implies that the criminal leadership has exchanged hands. It went from MS-13 to Nayib Bukele. Salvadoran that studies violence here. First of all, double Bukele forever and always. And I doubt Kilmer is dead, despite what TikTok believes. And if he is, then it was the state that killed him. People overlooked that in CECOT, rival gangs are incarcerated next to each other, and there has not, to my knowledge, been an issue with that. Instead, the state has been responsible for killing and torturing people. There's also suspicion that Bukele himself, in a deal not dissimilar to like previous deals that Mexican leadership have done with the cartels, most likely also cut a separate side deal with MS-13 as well, which is part of the reason why he wanted the American MS-13 leadership that was apprehended to be sent expeditiously to El Salvador before they were able to make public statements about the collaborative nature of MS-13 and Nayib Bukele. I feel like gang unity might arise because of such horrific treatment. I mean, there's not really much you can do. It's a concentration camp. This is the size of El Salvador overlaid over Dallas, Texas. Why would we send anyone there besides nefarious reasons? Is Guantanamo without having to talk to Cuba? It's ideal for Trump. Exactly. You think we don't have facilities to deal with this shit? Of course we do. It's just this way you get to wash your hands over the death camp happening on U.S. soil. Did you not see that I said only the worst are sent to CECOT and the rest focus on rehab? CECOT is the worst? No, you're wrong. You're just, I think you're delusional. You're absolutely wrong. No, it's not the worst of the worst that are sent to CECOT, dumb. What are you talking about? That's the entire problem here. No, it's random people, random street vendors, for example. It's whoever the police decide is MS-13, and there's no due process. That's kind of the whole problem here happening in America as well. You just make it up. No, Nayib Bukele initially wanted to focus on rehabilitation, focus on solving the underlying economic problems where crime manifests. That's true. That is how Nayib Bukele actually rose to power, and then very quickly was like, yeah, all that. They literally grab people for tattoos, even if it's not MS-13 related tattoos. They grab people for being street vendors if they've been threatened by MS-13. It has nothing to do with actual MS-13 gang activity. The idea that it's like the most rugged of the MS-13 criminals that are being shipped into the facility is wrong. And that is just for the Salvadorans. Like, we're not even talking about the people that we've shipped over there. It's outlined in this article. El Salvador named one of the world's safest countries. At what cost? El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, declared an initial month-long state of emergency in March 2022 due to heightened gang violence and a wave of murders, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. So far, the state of emergency has been renewed 30 times, the latest of which was announced by the Salvadoran Legislative Assembly on October 4th. To date, this tool has allowed 604 days without homicides and the arrest of more than 82,000 people linked to gangs. In addition, it has positioned the country among the safest in the world. The state of emergency suspended several Salvadoran rights and freedoms as per the OAS. 1. Right of assembly, freedom of association, right to be informed of the reasons for detention, inviolability of correspondence and telecommunications. Regardless, the entity does recognize a constant decrease in homicide cases, with the rate per 100,000 people going from 21.2 in 2020 to 4.9 in 2023. Okay. The alleged human rights violations. El Salvador has been called out for massive human rights violations, including thousands of arbitrary detentions and violations of due process, as well as torture and ill treatment, according to Amnesty International. In a report published on December 2023, the organization detailed a rise in systematic detentions, forced disappearances, and instances of torture since the introduction of the state of emergency. There's also suspicion that he most likely did a secret deal with MS-13. The other suspicion also is that the government is not correctly clocking the murders as well. They're just not reporting the murders potentially and the disappearances to artificially lower the murder rate as well. And it's been successful in terms of propaganda. It's been successful. The remaining Salvadoran population that isn't imprisoned love it. They love him and they love this. That's how terrifying the MS-13 crime situation was to begin with. Okay? So you're just going to speculate? No, there's plenty of evidence as to why there is a secret side deal that Washington Post covered it as well. Bukele agreed to accept hundreds of suspected gang members living in the United States. In return, he wanted the U.S. to send him less than a dozen MS-13 gang members in U.S. custody. Why was he so intent on getting the MS-13 guys? Washington Post reports. Some Salvadoran analysts believe Bukele wants the gang leaders back so they won't testify about his government's involvement with them and potentially put him in legal trouble. If these returns of Salvadoran gang members continue, it takes away the possibility that the U.S. judicial system will open a case against Bukele for negotiations and agreements with terrorist groups, said Juan Martinez de Bucion, an anthropologist who has studied the gangs. Bukele has denied making deals with gangs. Such negotiations by his predecessors were highly unpopular domestically. A lot of ultra-conservative people and even non-conservative people in El Salvador like Bukele. They think he has been able to put a dent in the crime that MS-13 is engaged in. And to a certain degree, it has been successful. The problem here, however, is not that the incredible torture prison scheme that he has created is horrifying in and of itself. The issue also is that they're grabbing random people off the street with no due process. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, if you become the crime If the government becomes the MS-13 gang, then yeah, technically there is no crime because it's a police state. Then why are his approval ratings so high? I don't know. Think about the United States of America. The United States of America is an even better analog to this because the rates of crime, specifically violent crime, are nowhere near as high as El Salvador. And yet the people were made to believe that there is like an undocumented migrant crime panic that has taken place in this country, and therefore are totally fine with these sorts of insane, unprecedented schemes that the Trump administration is engaging with right now. It's directly Hitlerian policy, and most people are either A, oblivious to it, or B, the ones who are aware of it are in support of it. So think about how that can happen. Try to analyze how that can happen in a country where there isn't the same level of crime, and then think about what it would look like, how bloodthirsty normal Americans would be like if there was that level of crime as well. The United States Department of State also recognizes the allegations in their El Salvador Human Rights Report in 2023, signaling arbitrary killings, cruel treatment by security forces, harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, and extensive gender-based violence as some of the barriers which have undermined President Bukele's security strategy. The Socorro Judicio Humanitario Foundation, which provides free legal advice to innocent Salvadorans criminalized by the state of emergency, has reported 315 deaths of incarcerated people since the establishment of the measure in 2022. The most prevalent causes of death signaled by the association are violence and lack of medical attention, although unknown causes of death have increased in 2024. These people only had the right to a hearing for the imposition of captivity measures, after which they died under the guardianship of the state. Amnesty International also explained that the widespread pattern of arbitrary arrest targets people from marginalized communities especially, which already suffer from crime and extreme poverty. The conditions that inmates experience within these prisons has also been heavily denounced by human rights organizations. As per the OAS, incarcerated individuals are stripped down to their underwear, placed in small cells where they sleep on the floor, and do not have access to clean water or food. So the torturous conditions are already inhumane and unacceptable. Even when they are torturing MS-13 gang members, by the way, just so you understand. But the major problem here on top of that is that it's not all MS-13 gang members. It's not all rugged criminals. It's just what the state has decided is a rugged criminal. Yeah, Salvadoran here who's been and is going again this year. Reason for Bukele's high popularity is because living conditions have improved. It's just that simple. So they see the improvement and think, well, it's working, and either don't care or see it as necessary. They've fallen for the propaganda. And for the record, we're talking about what's going on in El Salvador, but what's happening in El Salvador is no longer just about El Salvador, because we're sending Americans to this torture facility. And the reasons as to why we're doing that, the reasons as to why we're sending Americans or, legal permanent residents and potentially Americans down the line to this torture slave camp without due process, with no mechanisms to bring back these people, even if the Supreme Court demands that they bring back these people, is because we want to have an unaccountable torture slave labor colony that is not on U.S. soil, where we can just like ship enemies of the state to. And considering that the Trump administration is entertaining the notion of even drawing penises on a Tesla as an act of terror, that could mean anyone and everyone. It's very weird that a lot of people refuse to recognize how this will them down the line. It is shocking.
The border, when even in Democrat-run cities, they get a help from the work you're doing. So I'm really happy to be here, honored, and eager to help.
Well, we had a terrible thing happen. We had an administration that allowed people to come in freely into our country from not only South America, but from...
Tip, don't blow up a car. Yeah, okay, man. Blowing up a car, by the way, is a crime. It's just totally separate from a crime that can get you as an American citizen to be black bagged and shipped without due process to a slave camp where you might die. Okay? What are you talking about? Like, what are we doing? What is this attitude? Just everyone then, that's This is the logical conclusion that so many dumb, mouth-breathing fascists come to, where it's just like, oh, you did a crime? Like, that's what you're saying. Like, you have no imagination on how this could one day harm you, okay?
All over the world, many from the Congo in Africa, Asia, all over the world, Europe, rough parts of Europe. And they came from prisons, and they came from mental institutions, and they came from gangs, and the gangs of Venezuela and other places.
I don't do crime.
And
dog, normal daily activities that you engage in today could be considered a crime tomorrow. How is this difficult to understand? You are a idiot. Also, it doesn't matter if you do a crime. If there's no due process, someone can just say you are doing a crime and black bag you anyway. That's the whole point of eroding due process. If there's no free speech, for example, and no due process, for example, these are two things that the Trump administration is eroding at this moment. Someone could just decide that they don't like the thought crime that you engaged in and black bag you. The only thing holding this entire structure together for you in your mind is the fantasy that it will never happen to you or a loved one. You don't actually need to do something. If there's no due process, someone could just claim that you did something, and it's enough for you to get sent to the slave labor camp.
hundreds of thousands and even millions of them came. 21 million people altogether, but many of the people that came, just a tremendous percentage of them were criminals, in some cases violent criminals. We had 11,088 known murderers. Half of them murdered more than one person. This was allowed by a man who, what he did to our country is just unbelievable. So we're straightening it out, we're getting him out. But what they did and what that party did to our country, open borders, anybody could come in. As soon as I heard that, I said, every prison's going to be emptied out into our country. That's what happened. And we're straightening it out. And we just had numbers. We had the highest recruiting numbers in the history of our country going into police departments. And a year ago, we had the lowest numbers. You couldn't hire a
biggest
police.
change. Yeah.
Nobody's
From
ever
the
seen.
lowest to the highest.
And the military
said,
now,
okay.
Marines, the Army.
Okay, do you understand the point, though? Do you understand how this is dangerous for everyone, including yourself? No matter how dumb you are, even the dumbest person, I think, can be convinced that they are also under threat.
Air Force, Coast Guard. Every slot is, I mean, we have the best numbers we've ever had. We call it recruitment numbers. And we've never had anything like it. We had records on at every single level. But very important, the policemen. The policemen are joining forces now that we're having a hard time with policemen because we weren't protecting our police. Yeah. And we cherish our police. The police are great, and the firemen and everybody else. But we have the highest numbers that we've ever had, the most enthusiasm. Great enthusiasm on trade and other things. We're doing great. We're taking in billions and billions of dollars. We made 2 weeks ago, I gave them a little bit of a pause because, you know, you have to show a little flexibility, but we go back to what we have to do. The markets have been very strong once they got used to it, but we were losing $2 billion a day. There's no company big like this. This is the biggest deal ever made. Now we're making $3 billion a day. We're a great country, but we had stupid people running this country, and I can say it. But what they've done to us at the border should never and can never be forgotten. It's a sin, what they did, and you are helping us out, and we appreciate it.
Actually, what you're doing with the border is remarkable. It has dropped, what, 95%? It's incredible.
As of this morning, 99%, 99.1% to be exact.
Why are those numbers not in the media?
Well, they get out with the fake news, you know, like CNN over here doesn't want to put them out because they don't like putting out good numbers. They only like putting out because I think they hate our country, actually.
Yeah,
but it's a shame. You're right. Isn't that a great question? Why doesn't the media? Why don't they put out numbers?
Yeah, 99%. I mean, it's crazy, right?
We're doing
It's
great.
a crazy turnaround.
Christy, could you maybe say a couple of words about the border? How we're doing?
You know, it's just been absolutely phenomenal what a great leader can do. Clear direction. Our laws matter. We should only have people in our country that love us, and the Border Patrol and our ICE officers and law enforcement officers have done fantastic work. So we're proud of them. Now we just need to get the criminals and murderers and dangerous gang members and terrorist organizations out of our country. So, Mr. President Bukele, we thank you very much for your partnership. It has been wonderful for us to be able to have somewhere to send the worst of the worst and someone to partner with.
This entire conversation is happening on the heels of a person who demonstrably is not the worst of the worst, that the American federal government has actively admitted was not the worst of the worst. The El Salvador president refusing to order the return of the wrongly deported U.S. man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, okay, despite a unanimous Supreme Court decision, 9-0 Supreme Court decision, in direct violation of the Supreme Court's orders, that the Trump administration is utilizing the language surrounding the Supreme Court's unanimous decision to their advantage, while also simultaneously saying that they have no interest in facilitating this anyway. The president of El Salvador said in a meeting with Donald Trump at the White House on Monday that he would not order the return of a Maryland man who was deported in error to a Salvadoran mega prison. The question is preposterous, Nayib Bukele said in the Oval Office on Monday, where he was welcomed by Trump and spoke with the president and members of his cabinet. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I'm not going to do it. This person is not a terrorist. This person is not even in MS-13. This person is in the crosshairs of MS-13. The American judiciary, the American justice system found that this person was not only not MS-13, but also simultaneously in under threat from MS-13 if he were ever to be sent back to El Salvador. The government said, we cannot deport this person because you don't usually deport someone to another country in any case. But even if there was a situation where this person committed an act so vicious that they were deportable, they cannot be deported to El Salvador. Okay? He was in the process of going through his asylum application when he was black bagged and shipped away. Not only did all that happen, not only did all this happen, the federal government also admitted that it was wrong. They engaged in an administrative error and falsely deported this person to El Salvador. I don't have the power to return him to the United States, and said he would not release the man into El Salvador either. I'm not very fond of releasing terrorists into the country. The comments came a day after the Trump administration claimed that it's not legally obligated to secure the return of Abrego Garcia, despite the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that the administration should facilitate bringing him back. Lawyers for the Justice Department argued in court filings on Sunday that asking El Salvador to return Abrego Garcia from a notorious mega prison should be considered foreign relations and was therefore outside of the scope of the courts. How is the ruling enforceable? No ruling is technically enforceable. The judiciary has the power to persuade. That's it. Nothing else. The judiciary, the Supreme Court does not have any mechanism of enforcement beyond what it says goes. If the federal government refuses to follow through on the Supreme Court's decision, you create a constitutional crisis. That means the entirety of the judiciary is done. It's over. There's no power anymore. Yeah, the judiciary requires a buy-in from the executive and society at large. They have no enforcement mechanism. This is a true constitutional crisis in every sense of the term. Yes. So what's happening right now with Nayib Bukele is the Trump administration basically saying, what are we going to do about it?
We'd like to continue that partnership because it's been a powerful message of consequences. Mr. President, you wanted people to know that there was consequences if you break our laws and harm our people and endanger families. And this is a clear consequence for the worst of the worst, that we have somewhere to put them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we even had this gang member from Venezuela, one of the ones you sent, and we interviewed him just to get some information, etc. from them. And he said, oh, well, I got arrested 6 times, but they released me the 6 times, so I should be released again. And then I said, well, what's the last thing you do? And he said, well, I shot a cop in the leg, but I didn't kill him. I just shot him in the leg. And we're like, this guy was arrested 6 times here in the United States, 6 times. He was released 6 times, and in the he was released 5 times, and the last time he was sent to El Salvador, right? So he's not getting released. But the last time he shot a cop, actually, and he shot him in the leg. So these are, you know, like you said, yeah, there's something broken.
It's the liberal establishment. But they're not running things anymore in this country, and we're run by, and I don't say conservative, I don't say anything, we're run by people with great common sense.
Yeah, common sense.
Yeah, that's not the point, is it? That's not who we're talking about right now, is it? Even that guy should still go through the criminal justice system here in the United States of America. If he shot an American cop, he needs to go to American prison. That's my attitude on this issue, but like sending him to El Salvador is insane. It doesn't make any sense. Having said that, however, the overwhelming majority of people that we've sent down to the CECOT facility so far are not even convicted of any sort of wrongdoing. They're not even accused of any sort of wrongdoing. The overwhelming majority have no criminal record whatsoever. They've been grabbed off the streets for erroneous claims with this like incredibly stupid, arbitrary point system that they've designed to be like, oh, you got a tattoo and you're brown? It's over. You're going to CECOT. It's not even about deporting them at this point back to their nation of origin. It's just straight up permanently jailing them in a slave camp. It is insane.
It's all common sense. It's not liberal conservative. It's common sense. Like, do you allow men to play in women's sports? Do you allow men to box your women and box? Because I know you have a lot of boxing.
That's violence.
That's abuse of a woman. It's abuse of a woman. But we have people that fight to the death because they think men should be able to play in women's sports.
Why should he get fed in American prisoners with taxpayer money? They're not even citizens. Oh my God, brother. Oh my God. Oh my God. How are we having this conversation over and over and over again every single time? Okay. The American criminal justice system has a higher standard until Donald Trump had a higher standard. Okay. The entire purpose is to make sure that justice is served. Do you understand? If an undocumented migrant shoots and kills, I doubt that. What do you mean you doubt that? Well, that's not an argument. Okay, never mind. You doubt it. Okay, well, I guess owned. If you or one of your loved ones was wronged by an undocumented migrant or a documented migrant or a U.S. citizen, you want the American courts to at the very least go through the process and punish these people, convict them and charge them of the crimes and the wrongdoing that they engaged in. It's so stupid. I hate that because Americans are so vindictive and so insane when it comes to crime and punishment that they straight up, no, I would want the death penalty. Dude, it's over, man. We are just a nation of bloodthirsty fascists, okay? Every suburb has Adolf Hitler. Like 9-month subscriber, okay? 9-month subscriber, just straight up Adolf Hitler. When it comes to crime and punishment, no, I would want the death penalty. When I hear stuff like this, I do think, you know, not the worst that we have Donald Trump. We kind of do deserve it.
Sports, and some of those sports, it wouldn't matter much, but it still matters. But some of them are very dangerous for women.
Some years ago, like you said, a decade ago or so, women rights movements were pressuring so that we enacted specific laws to avoid men abusing women. And I think those laws were great because there were a lot of men abusing women. But now some of the same people are trying to backtrack on that and actually trying to make new laws allowing men to abuse women in sports. So actually that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
It's crazy. You know, they have weightlifting records, right?
Yeah.
A woman gets up and swings. She's incredible.
Oh my God. They're talking about like trans athletes. I'm losing my mind, dude. This is such... This is what we deserve. This is what we deserve. We deserve the divine punishment that Donald Trump is dishing out to all Americans. We really do deserve it. We're so stupid. We're such dumb hogs, dude. We're championing this. We're like, this is great. This is awesome. Look at our brilliant president doing what's right, combating the real issues, you know? Trans athletes.
It's about 100 pounds. What are you going to do? A record that hadn't been broken in 18 years. You know, they put on an ounce, quarter of an ounce, eighth of an ounce for 18 years. Now they have a guy come up, ping. The whole thing is crazy. But they continue to fight. And I don't like talking about it because I want to save it for just before the next election. I said, my people, don't even talk about it because they'll change. And but I watched this morning, there was a congressman fighting to the death for men.
Documented New York reports that one of the Venezuelans deported to El Salvador was a 19-year-old with no criminal record, no tattoos, and who wasn't even a target of the ICE operation, but ended up sent there anyway. An ICE agent even said he's not the one when arrested. Wilmer only found out his son had been detained after receiving a phone call on March 15th from his nephew, Luis, who lives with them. That morning was their last time together. They had gone around the corner to do their laundry. Later that day, Wilmer said his son met with a friend to get some help with some errands at the American Red Cross. He learned this from Luis, who looked at the situation from inside the apartment. When his son was on his way back, just steps from his home, ICE agents stopped him. The officers grabbed him and two other boys right at the entrance to our building. One said, no, he's not the one, like they were looking for someone else. But the other said, take him anyway. That moment marked the beginning of Wilmer's search for answers. Answers he's still waiting for. This is 19-year-old Merville Gutierrez, who was grabbed off the street in New York City days before he was sent to El Salvador. His family insists he has no connection to Tren de Agua. He doesn't even have any tattoos. 19-year-old, take him anyway. This is Gestapo shit. This is stuff that we learned about in history books. Many of you in this community learned those lessons and are terrified. But some, I think, learned those lessons were like, why don't we do that here? It would be awesome to do that here. And that's why they're championing the doing of that here.
To play against women in sports. And you say to yourself, why? What are they doing, right? What are they doing? But your country's not too big in that.
No, of course not. We're big in protecting women.
Good. Yeah. That's right. It's a very important form of protection. Yeah.
And as you can see, most of my cabinet are women. So
that's impressive.
Yeah.
That's why you're
and
running.
they're not DEI hires or anything. They're just great at what they do. Right?
That's right. This is very impressive.
Yeah,
this is a first. We've had women, but we've never had three of them right here. That's
4 and 3 men.
Look who we have. You guys feel a little bit mistreated? That's good. I like it. We've been advanced. I've been very advanced in that regard too. We have Pam, who's been so fantastic. Christy, and the most powerful woman they say anywhere.
I know, exactly. They're all afraid of
Susie Wells. They say, oh, she's tough. Yeah. Most powerful woman in the world, according to magazines. What do I know? Yes. But I think she probably is.
Yeah, she probably is.
Yeah, she probably is.
Congratulations.
And you know, Stephen, who's done such a great job. Thank you, sir. We have great people.
Very famous too.
But we love working with him. He really lets them have it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no games.
No. It's very good.
He knows. Do you have any questions, please?
President Trump.
No, let's not start with
Mr. President.
CNN because they're just so
Mr. President.
wrong. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. You repeatedly mentioned last night that Russia's attack on Ukraine was a mistake. What is the exact mistake? And have you given Putin a deadline to actually move toward a ceasefire?
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent, and if Zelensky were competent, and I don't know that he is. We had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was, I wasn't here, that war started. There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen. And Biden should have stopped it. And you take a look at Putin. I'm not saying anybody's an angel, but I will tell you, I went 4 years and it wasn't even a question. He would never, and I told him, don't do it. You're not going to do it. And it was the apple of his eye, but there was no way that he would have done it. All you had to do is lower oil prices. If you lowered oil prices, Biden kept the prices so high because he made it impossible to get it. If you lowered oil prices, you would have never had the war. But you wouldn't have had it with me anyway. That war would have never happened. And I think it's a great abuse. So now what do? You get a country where 25% of its land is gone, and the best locations, where millions of people are killed. You know, you haven't reported accurately the death. And this was Biden's war, and I'm trying to stop it. And I think we're going to do a good job. I hope we're going to do it. They lose 2,500 young people a week, think on average. Now they're Russians and they're Ukrainians, but it's 2,000. We don't care. It's like whatever it is.
Intolerable.
They're not from your country. They're not from mine. But I want to stop it. 2,500, it's a killing field. It's like the Civil War. You take a look, I look at the satellite pictures. This should not be happening in our time. Of course, our time can be pretty violent, as we know. But that's a war that should have never been allowed to start. And Biden could have stopped it, and Zelensky could have stopped it, and Putin should have never started it. Everybody's to blame.
Have you spoken to President Zelensky, sir, about his offer to purchase more Patriot missile batteries?
Oh, I don't know. He's always looking to purchase missiles, you know. He's against, listen, when you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war, right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size and then hope that people give you some missiles. If we didn't give them what we gave, remember, I gave them javelins. That's how they won their first big battle with the tanks that got stuck in the mud, and they took them out with javelins. They have an expression that Obama at the time, Obama gave them sheets and Trump gave them javelins. But just something that should have never happened. It's a really shame. The towns are destroyed. Towns and cities are, you know, largely destroyed. They have the spires, you know, the beautiful spires that go up. They say they were the most beautiful in the world in Ukraine for whatever reason, but the most beautiful in the world, they're mostly laying on their side, shattered and broken. And most importantly, you have millions of people dead. Millions of people dead because of 3 people. I would say 3 people. Let's say Putin, number 1, but let's say Biden, who had no idea what the hell he was doing, number 2, and Zelensky. And all I can do is try and stop it. That's all I want to do. I want to stop the killing. And I think we're doing well in that regard. I think you'll have some very good proposals very soon.
Last question, sir. Have you attributed a motive through the FBI investigation behind the attack on Governor Josh Shapiro over the weekend?
No, I haven't, but the attacker was not a fan of Trump, I understand, just from what I read and from what I've been told. The attacker basically wasn't a fan of anybody. It's probably just a whack job. And certainly a thing like that cannot be allowed to happen.
Is your good relation with President Bukele the best guarantee that this time you won't terminate the temporary protected status?
I have a great relationship with this man. I have the best relationship with him. We've known each other. I've known him since he was a very young man, as I said, very, very young. And I was impressed. I said, look how this guy is. In fact, you sort of look like a teenager. You look like a teenager. I said, what kind of a country is this? He grew up well in the last 5 years.
Do you support the extension for nationals of El Salvador under temporary protected status?
Do you plan to ask him?
Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Thank you, President. Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, 2 courts, an immigration court and an appellate.
This is insane to me. Like, the government openly at this point recognizes that they did the wrong thing. And a part of recognizing that this was an administrative error means recognizing the lower court decision, the immigration court decision to offer this person protected status against deportation from the United States of America, specifically to El Salvador. And they just simply lie over and over again in the court proceedings, where in the court proceedings that took place, they found out that this person was not a part of MS-13, that the confidential informant that lied to the police that he was MS-13 claimed that he was in New York. This person had never been in New York. On top of that, he was able to prove that if he were to be sent back to El Salvador, his life would be in danger. This is precisely the reason why they got the protections. Why won't reporters fact check them? There is nothing you can do. There's not really much you can do in terms of fact checking. I mean, He also said that Zelensky started the war again. You know what I mean? He's just like lying about so many different things. I mean, look, here it is. The war between Russia and Ukraine is Biden's war, not mine. I just got here and for 4 years during my term had no problem in preventing it from happening. President Putin and everyone else respected your president. I had nothing to do with this war, but I'm working diligently to get the death and destruction to stop. If the 2020 presidential election was not, and it was, in so many ways, that horrible war would have never happened. President Zelensky, crooked Joe Biden did an absolutely horrible job in allowing this travesty to begin. There were so many ways of preventing it from ever starting, but that is the past. Now we have to stop. Now we have to get it to stop and fast. So sad. Everything he says is incorrect. Everything he says is a lie on every issue. Whether it be tariffs, saying that there's going to be exemptions, but no exemptions, saying that like, Xi Jinping's going to call me any day now, and then being like, why won't Xi Jinping call me? Everything. He's just breaking everything. And it's not like things were great already. They weren't. They certainly weren't. Kaya, place.
Appellate Immigration Court ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him?
And you are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen Miller, wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant. Because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States.
That's not true. Every part of what he stated here is wrong. And I know Charlie Kirk posted this as like, oh, he really popped off on this one. He just, I guess that it's cool. You can just lie about all this
starting point. As 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13.
That's not true. First of all, that is straight up not true.
When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue...
Oh, that's kidnapping. That's actually the kidnapping. It's not what we did. What we did was a legal enforcement that we recognized wasn't legal now, but returning that person would be the real kidnapping. Okay, kidnap him and return him then. Who are they talking about? Is this guy's name public? Yes. His name is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's a Maryland resident with a wife and a child. He was a member of a union. It's so insane that they're acting like this is the sovereignty of El Salvador issue.
It was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful and its main components were reversed 9-0.
This is also an inversion of the truth once again. Here's Ed Whelan's statement on the matter. Outrageous misinterpretation of the Supreme Court ruling. The unanimous court ruled that the district court order properly requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. Yes, the court also stated that the intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. And it told the district court to clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. But one, due regard doesn't mean that the district court couldn't have any teeth to effectuate. And two, in any event, the district court dropped effectuate from its revised order, so this is all irrelevant. Duty to facilitate continues. As I've said, the Trump administration will probably be able to get away with its bad faith defiance of the court on this matter, but it's appalling that it thinks that anyone is stupid enough to believe that it is actually complying with the court's ruling, or rather reversing the court's actual ruling by saying, no, the Supreme Court actually is on our side. The unanimous decision is there to defend our our immigration enforcement action. It's not. It's the exact opposite. If it was in defense of your immigration enforcement action, you wouldn't be playing legalese semantics with the decision. You would just say, the decision is clear as day. The Supreme Court thinks what we did was totally permissible. Instead, you have to hyper-focus on what facilitate versus effectuate means. Facilitation doesn't mean that this is an enforceable action, for example. Like that's the entire point of contention here. If the unanimous Supreme Court decision was stating that the federal government has the power to do this, they would not have said the federal government has to facilitate a return of the Maryland resident immediately. What do they gain by keeping him there? A million different reasons. One, they stand firm and test out the boundaries of the Supreme Court. Two, they basically violate Supreme Court orders without triggering a constitutional crisis, which gives them more opportunity to do this down the line. Three, if he were to be returned, he talks about the horrifying nature of the prisons. You got, 60 Minutes doing you set a precedent, you set a scary precedent for the Trump administration that like some of the people that they are interested in unjustifiably sending over to the slave colony can be returned to U.S. soil. And on top of that, they talk about the horrifying conditions there and the horrifying mistreatment that they experience as a Maryland resident. All of a sudden, it destroys the secretive nature of these operations, because you don't want any microscope on this. Okay, you don't want any sort of attention being brought forward here. They're trying to basically start a process in which they have enough utilizing the pre-existing legal restrictions to their advantage to slowly but surely erode the last mechanisms of safety that would stop the administration from doing stuff like this, whether it be due process, whether it be violating court orders. So if they were to actually return this person and he comes back, it's horrible propaganda against the administration. It ruins everything that they're trying to do. It makes them look weak. It sets a precedent that they have to abide by court. They have to abide by the authority of the courts. Why did they even admit they made a mistake? Also, was he really the only one? No, of course not. He's not the only person that was sent there under false pretense. He's the only one that a immigration attorney of the state accidentally admitted to the administrative error on. That attorney has also literally been fired, I think. I think they fired him, right? Like Pam Bondi literally said, you're done, you're out. Why did you ever admit to this? That's the problem. Virtually all of the people, with the exception of like a handful, are actually sent to El Salvador under similar conditions. This one is the most egregious because there was a directive from the court to not send him to El Salvador. It's the tip of the iceberg.
Stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to
But the
ask for
Supreme
any
Court's
help to get him
asking
back?
to...
And
that-
what was the ruling
that-
in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling.
That's not what happened. It's the exact opposite of what happened. That is
saying
incredible.
that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
no version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked President Bukele, what is
Bukele?
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to be suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like,
like again, everyone is just saying he's a terrorist. He's not.
It's preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into our
country. I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way, to Marco's point. The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You have no credibility. Please, go ahead.
President Trump, thank you so much. How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible.
Yeah, why won't you cover the news in a way where it suits my propaganda purposes is a crazy way to redirect the question. It's not even redirection. It's just like, why don't you just feed my ego? That's crazy. Like, doing this while he's openly defying a unanimous decision from the Supreme Court and simultaneously without evidence, with only evidence to prove the opposite that's readily available, claiming that the guy that they're defying the Supreme Court order for is actually a terrorist, and also admitting that they want to do this to American citizens as well. How the f does nobody understand how terrifying this is? It's not like they're sheltering you from the truth. They're saying this is the goal, this is the purpose, this is what they are moving in the direction of. And it seems like a lot of Americans are oblivious, and the ones who are not oblivious are actively fantasizing about this. I don't even know how you combat this. I truly don't know how you, I don't know what to do in this situation. This is just unprecedented territory. Yeah, meanwhile, the army is arriving at the southern border as they're gearing up potentially for an invasion. I don't even know what they're going to do there. This is openly defiant of the Supreme Court, which specifically upheld in a unanimous decision an order that requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador. Here it is. The order properly requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador. They just wrote it. Clear as day. Trump administration claims SCOTUS ruling doesn't compel it to actually seek illegally deported man's release from prison, only to let him into the U.S. if he manages to get out.
And I just asked the president, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please? As many as we can get out of our country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden through open borders. Open borders. You probably hear open borders and you can't even understand it because nobody can understand. Nobody smart or with common sense can understand it. So we have millions of people that should not be in this country that are dangerous.
The only person that I've seen that is like actively doing something about this is Van Hollen. Okay. Respect to Chris Van Hollen on this. Requests meeting with President Bukele to discuss the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Announces intent to travel to El Salvador this week if Abrego Garcia is not returned. U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland has requested a meeting with Nayib Bukele when he's in the United States. And if he is not returned by the end of this week, he's going to go down to El Salvador. This is actually 100% something I am in support of 1,000,000%. As an American senator, you have a lot of opportunity to bring attention to issues, and putting yourself directly in the crosshairs is a fantastic way to do that. And I'm glad that there is at least someone out there that's willing to do this. Imagine if Booker did this for Mahmoud. Yeah, he would never in a million years do that, because Cory Booker is Israel's guy, okay? That's the reality. But yes, that is the expectation from our senators. This is the right thing to do. This is the smart thing to do. I'm very happy that there's at least someone demonstrating the courage necessary. Partially because when you're an American senator and a country like El Salvador, let's say, denies you entry into the country, you're basically taking an action not just against an American senator, a member of the Democratic Party, but you're taking action against America. And I think that will have a profound impact on the way that this is treated in the media and the way that Americans will respond to this. It will create a situation where Americans who run off the notion that we're the number one country on the planet, with our citizens having extra rights in comparison to everybody else, will get mad at the Trump administration if the Trump administration doesn't turn around and defend an American senator. But can he actually get him out? Trump won't approve of this and won't care if they don't let him in. No, I'm saying that, let's say Senator Chris Van Hollen goes to, but this is a 2080 issue. Most Americans support that. No, they do not. No, they do not. You are crazy for just simply repeating something that Stephen Miller is saying. Americans don't know what the they're in support of until it becomes an issue that is in front of their eyes. That's why I place a lot of importance on senators like this taking action against this, to put this in the forefront of American consciousness. Do you not understand how many times do we have to experience this until people recognize that something being considered a 2080 issue doesn't necessarily mean it will stay a 2080 issue? This is at the heart of my anger towards the Democratic Party in terms of immigration. No counter messaging on immigration has created an environment, a media landscape that is heavily dominated by right-wing lies on the issue. This is precisely the reason why Americans are either, like I said, oblivious to the actions that the Trump administration is taking, or at the very least entertain it or enjoy it and support it, the ones who are knowledgeable on the actions being taken to begin with. But that is only because they do not comprehend the full scope of what is happening. Yeah. Also ironic to say this exactly. These dumbass shadows don't realize that 2 years ago, Israel had 80% of American support. Now it's become a 2080 issue in the other direction, at least in the Democratic Party. Now, this doesn't stop the Democrats from refusing to recognize the popular support towards Palestinian emancipation that is in their base, because, you know, their careers rely on them refusing to recognize it. But these kinds of actions unironically, when paired up with the reality that every American can experience, every American can see, will quickly change the attitude. Look no further than the tariffs. Donald Trump ran on tariffs. He could say he won on tariffs. Look at the Americans' attitude towards tariffs now. Because once implemented, everybody realized, oh my God, this is going to have a horrible impact on both the stock market and also the price of goods. Please drop this. This is a 2080 issue nonsense. We are a particularly stupid country, okay? We're a particularly dumb and stubborn nation.
Not just people, because we have people, but we have millions of people that are murderers, drug dealers. They've been allowed to come into our country by other countries that were very smart. When they heard that this very low IQ president, and by the way, I took my cognitive exam as part of my physical exam, and I got the highest mark, and one of the doctors said, "Sir, I've never seen anybody get that kind of, that was the highest mark." I hope you're happy with that, although they haven't been bugging me too much to take a cognitive, but I did do my physical and it was released. I hope you're all happy with it. I notice there's no question, so probably you are. But the cognitive, they said to me, "Sir, would you like to take a cognitive test?" I said, "Did Biden take one?" "No." "Did anybody take one?" "No, not too many people took them." I said, what about Obama? Did he take one?" "No, he didn't take one either." I said, "Let me be the only one to take one." But I've actually taken them 3 times already. I like taking them because they're not too tough for me to take. But we had a great physical exam, so I know you're going to ask that. And the doctors who are total professionals, Walter Reed Medical Center, they're great people. And I visited a soldier that was badly wounded, incredible soldier, lost his leg, and spent a lot of time with him. I mean, great with his mother. And it was really a very great thing. They do a phenomenal job. I just want to say, Walter Reed, I was there for, 5-6 hours. You were there with me. But I took a full physical, and it came out perfecto, so that's good. It means you've got me for a little longer.
Would the U.S. be willing to pay for those facilities to be opened if new ones were going to be built?
I'd do something. We'd help them out, yeah. We help them. They're great facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games. I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have to be looking at the laws on that, Steve, okay?
How essential is it for you guys to be locking up these prisoners? And do you think more presidents should follow suit like you guys as far as taking a hard stance on crime here in the United States?
Well, I do. I think everybody has to. I mean, the president said it better than anybody. He said, you know, you have liberty and you have to have liberty, but to have liberty, not everybody is going to be good. And, you know, some are bad because they're sick. They're mentally deranged. They're bad. Then you have to take them. If you're going to have a country, you're going to have to take those people out. And we've been doing that. But this was like an unforced error, they would call it, where we had people that may hate our country, or maybe they're just stupid people. I think they're probably stupid people more so. A lot of people said they did it for the vote. But I did better with Hispanic people than they did, because they always use Hispanic. I did better. You people love me. I saw my poll numbers in your country up through the roof, right? 91%. Some people think they do it for the vote. But they don't have to do it for the vote. They cheat. You know?
How dangerous the U.S. for tourists right now? Incredibly dangerous. Straight up. I never thought I would say this. Insanely dangerous. Because they don't just deny you entry into the country, okay, which they have already. That's a saving grace. You getting denial of entry into the country saves your ass, because we don't just deport anymore. We just send you to a slave labor prison and then actively say, we can't bring you back. Sorry, sucks to suck. Actually, do not come. If you think you have legal protections, let me tell you right now, you do not have any legal protections. And American citizens themselves will no longer have legal protections either. This has also obviously led to travel falling off of a cliff here. The U.S. Is one of the world's top travel spots, pulling in over 72 million visitors last year, generating 1.3 trillion. But lately, travel from Europe and Canada is down up to 35% thanks to Trump's talk and scary border stories. Trump is bankrupting the U.S. It's down 30% for most countries, 20 to 30%. It's okay, V. Thank you for the 10 gifted subs. They're also showed up seizing mobile devices of people they suspect just to look at contacts. They're doing this to American citizens too, by the way. They did this to an immigration lawyer. They literally sat him down and tried to go through his phone, and they said they knew he was an immigration lawyer. There's also the other side of the story where they're incredibly incompetent. They sent out a mass blast of emails to American citizens telling them to self-deport in 10 days. That also happened this past week. And it was so stupid that I initially thought it can't be real. There was an immigration attorney in the United States of America that revealed that her wife, who's also an American citizen, got a immigration enforcement email demanding that they self-deport in 7 days, saying that their saying that their legal permanent residency had been revoked. This person was not a legal permanent resident. They were a citizen. So not only is it horrifying, it's also incredibly stupid and incredibly incompetent as well. Yeah. How is this country going to host a World Cup is a real question. This is supposed to happen in a couple months. A well-respected MMA coach who always posts training tips and is based out of Australia says he arrived in the U.S. for an already scheduled seminar, but was detained at the border, thrown in a federal prison, and ultimately deported. Like, why the would you come here, dude? Oh, next year. Sorry, not this year. Next year. I don't even know how we get to next year at this stage. At this point, I don't know what next year looks like even. World Cup next year. Club World Cup is this summer. Yeah, there's a 2025 Cup in June and July, right? Are you afraid of being targeted by the Trump administration? Chatters, I am an American citizen. I was born here, okay? By the time the Trump administration decides to take illegal actions and enforcement against someone like myself, it's already over. I'm definitely on the list. Like, someone like myself would certainly be on the list with someone of my background, but I'm on the lower side of said list. Understand that many of you will have already been packed up by the time they get to someone like myself. I hope that we will at some point dial this back dramatically.